This episode of the KrakCast is brought to you by our friends at BigDoor24.pl. It's a new free service dedicated to helping expats to rent or buy a property and earn cash back on successful mortgage applications. BigDoor24.pl also has lots of tips and advice on renting and buying in Poland, so make sure you check them out and use the special promo code KrakCast to get a great cash back offer. And now, on with the show. Valentine's Day this week, guys, on Thursday. Special plans?
I'm going to be heading. I'm heading to the mountains, actually.
Yeah?
Alone?
Yeah. Nice one.
Yeah. No, I think it's not. It's for musical purposes, actually, not.
It's not love.
Gonna make some music.
And Mike, does
sweet music.
Does the missus expect anything for Valentine's Day?
I'm hoping she won't be looking at a calendar or anything like that. Yeah.
So we don't get excited about it anymore?
Usually only my bank account gets excited, and not in a good way.
Well, welcome back to the KrakCast News. I'm John. That's Dr. Mike. That's Josh over there on the soundboard, making us sound much better than we really do. Dave is out this week. He is on the warm and sunny beaches of Ireland for a few more days. He'll be back.
On the palm trees, I think.
On the palm trees, exactly. He'll be back next week. Okay, let's start off with a few things we want to talk about. You know, on the news, we love to make themes. We love to somehow combine the stories, and we don't necessarily choose the stories we want to talk about based on whether or not they fit with other ones. We just choose what we want to talk about, and then we look for a connection. And we've got basically two groups of stories today, one small one pretty big one. We're going to start with the small one. Two items in the news this week caught our attention. The first is about a report put out by the, what was it called again? The European Parliamentary Forum on Population and Development. Sounds fun, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Now, they are an NGO working closely with the European Union on things related to, population and development. They put out a report this week that says Poland is the worst in Europe when it comes to access to and information about contraception. Now, what's your first reaction when you hear that Poland is the worst in Europe? This is behind Belarus, behind Moldova, behind just some poor company here. What's your first reaction?
I wonder if these people have actually ever walked down a street in Krakow and seen a kiosk or a store, because there are condoms everywhere. They're for sale everywhere. For me, that's basic, simple contraception, and you can get them anywhere.
So actually, I have a point to make about this. So the correlation would surely be that if there's less knowledge about and less access to contraception, there's a lot more babies emerging in Poland. Correct?
Right,
Am I correct? Yeah, the birth rate is increased.
No, it's not.
It's not.
You're not correct at all. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I got this because a couple of media outlets linked to it or wrote about it, and they used it, as I knew they would. They used it as an excuse to kind of take a hammer to the current government of Poland and to write the standard cliched story about how Poland is regressing back to the Dark Ages and it's being dragged by the church and these retrograde attitudes towards certain social issues and whatnot, and access to contraception being one of them. And this is proof that Poland's going the wrong way. Europe is progressing forward, and that's ridiculous. And it just doesn't sound right to me. And like you said, Dr. Mike, when was the last time you went into any kind of corner shop, Żabka, whatever, certainly supermarkets, and they have a whole display of condoms right there. When it comes to, I want you to speak now as a doctor. When it comes to access to birth control pills, what does the process for that look like in Poland, by the way?
It's basically going to your gynecologist and saying, I want the pill. They give you a quick checkup, make sure are you a smoker, are you not a smoker, how's your blood pressure, blah, 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 and you get a prescription.
And it's on demand.
Yeah.
It's not like there's some kind of process where they have to consider whether or not you get it, right?
No, unless they see some medical reasons why you shouldn't be on hormonal therapy.
9 or something.
Yeah, you can get it pretty much no problem. And you go every 3 months and you get a full checkup because you can only get prescriptions for up to 3 months.
And you can get birth control pills at any regular pharmacy in the country, right?
Yeah, in the news, they sometimes mention somebody is like, oh, I'm a Catholic pharmacist and I won't sell them. I think those are like
97% of pharmacies.
99.9%. It's not
any idea? I don't know. Any idea how much that costs for birth control pills in Poland?
I know the mini pill, which is the single like hormone one with just progesterone. If I'm not mistaken, because it's subsidized as well, so you're not paying for the full price, it's something around like 20 zlotys.
So it's not prohibitive.
I'm not 100% sure, so don't hold me to it, but it's around that price range. And the more expensive, like one that has 2 hormones in it and is more effective, is only slightly more expensive than that.
Okay, let's say it's 50 zlotys. Yeah, let's just call it 50. That is not prohibitive, I think, for anyone in Poland, really. On 50 zlotys a month to take care of your contraceptive needs sounds reasonable. About 12 euros a month, right? So, again, I had the first reaction that you did. I saw this headline. I said, something is wrong here. It looks like a political agenda. So I go into this report that they put out. I take a deep dive into the stats and their charts and everything. And it turns out that this grade, again,
the percentage
last
structure
place grade is based on some criteria that I think no normal person would use. And by the way, before I give you the criteria, you know who scored just above Poland? Iceland. Now, is anybody going to accuse Iceland of being prisoner to some, Catholic dogma about birth control?
I think it's the most atheist country in Europe, actually.
Come on, people. Anyway, this bad grade that Poland received is based on a lot of things related to the role of the government. How much money does the government spend on birth control?
This is something.
How much money does the government spend on promoting awareness of various contraceptive services? How much money does the government spend on sex education in schools? And so by that measure, and by that measure alone, Poland is last in the class.
I thought it was kind of funny that they
doesn't make sense to me.
Because when I first saw this article, when you sent it to me, it's like in percentages. For me, when percentages are given, that means there's some kind of quantity, something that you can actually quantify.
Yeah, percentage of what?
And no, they just gave points to these different categories that they decided is there a government-sponsored website that talks about the pill? No, there isn't. So they lose
exactly. And not only that, and the fine print is tiny. I had to use my magnifying glass on the computer to look at this. One of the criteria for getting this percentage, again, what does that percentage even mean, is the quality of that website. So having a website is not enough. Then they grade the website. Is it excellent, good, fair, or poor, right? And Poland apparently has a poor website. And so they fall even further down the scale. And so it just looks really ridiculous.
And I just think it's funny, first of all, the whole issue of government-sponsored contraception, I think that's, something we could discuss until the cows come home. But I would think it's kind of suspect if a government is paying for, say, people to have children or subsidize children or promote childbirth in the form of, in Poland, 500 plus, and at the same time would be sponsoring programs on contraception. It's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot there. It's like choose one or the other. They're kind of contradictory programs here. Safe sex, of course, that's one issue. This is where condoms, are far and away a lot better than just the pill. But, sex education, education about diseases is one thing, but then contraception, when it comes to birth control, that's also another issue. And the government, kind of playing on two sides here, I don't really see how that could work.
Oh, I'm okay. Actually, I'm okay with that because I think that you want people who want to have lots of children, they should be open to information on how to have as many children as possible. And people who don't want to have any children should equally be open to have as much information as possible about how to have
information is one thing, but, why should the government be responsible for that kind of information?
Well, I know, and I agree on that. And indeed, why is it the government responsible?
It should be paying for people to have children and not to have children. It's kind of just
just for the benefit of anyone listening who doesn't know, and you get your news about Poland from certain websites, certain sources. No one in this country, and I mean no one in this country, is really stopped from getting any access to any birth control they want. If they want it, they can have it. It's, as we said earlier, if it's the corner store, if it's a supermarket, if it's the local pharmacy, there's no one in a school that's, running around with a crucifix in their hand, cursing at people who are considering, buying condoms. There's no propaganda on the streets. There aren't billboards telling you not to use. That's ridiculous. And access to birth control here is at least as easy as it is just about any place else you would care to.
Yeah, this website,
mention,
this report seems to suggest that access only counts if somebody else is paying for it and giving it to you for free.
That's a good way to sum up. Yeah. Moving on. I said everything at the top of the show. I said everything is connected here. The connection is this is demographic news. So we're talking about contraception, which affects the birth rate, and this story coming up now is about the birth and death rates. Interesting and a little bit depressing news out this week from the Polish General Statistical Office in Warsaw. Last year, 2018, just over 400,000 people, 414,000 people died. So call it, let's call it 1% of the population. No, sorry, is that 1%?
Yeah.
Well, something
like 0.8% or something.
Anyway, it's the highest number since World War II. Highest number in Poland since World War II.
And if people don't remember World War II, a lot of people died.
That was a big deal. It was. Now, part of the reason the number is especially high this year is because it reflects a demographic boost or boom that took place just after World War II. So those people born just after the war are beginning to reach the age where, well, they start to leave us. And so, a baby boom in a certain time results in a death boom X number of years later, right? So that's part of the explanation for what we're seeing now. But when you dive a little bit deeper into this report released by the government, you find some kind of disturbing ideas, some disturbing realities that they discovered when they talked to people about general health awareness and the things that cause people to have or contract the medical conditions that result in poor health and death. And for example, 40% of Poles, when asked, have you considered the factors that contribute to the likelihood of you having a heart attack or a stroke or cancer? Have you considered what causes this? 40% of the people said no. Haven't thought about it. Let's see. Most often, I just lost my number here. Oh, they say they had no idea of the factors that cause, for example, a heart attack. They couldn't name them. Things like, smoking and being obese and hypertension, couldn't name those. So more than half the people couldn't tell you what causes a goddamn heart attack.
I was surprised to read that as well, that people didn't understand that there are risk factors, things in their life that they can alter that actually impact their health and their outcome of these, of their health.
Don't smoke, reasonable diet, don't go overboard with alcohol, and you're not going to boost your chances of having any of these, medical events. This seems like common sense, or is not so common, or do you not trust these statistics?
With statistics, yeah, you can always take them with a grain of salt, but there's definitely this shows that there's a significant part of the population that still seems ill-informed when it comes to these, what I would consider common sense ideas. I thought everybody knew that smoking cigarettes and a bad diet is bad for your heart, but according to this, there's a bunch of people out there that don't really realize it, don't really connect that, don't really care. I didn't see the breakdown though with age groups, because it could be possible that people over 60, 70, with say a lower socioeconomic state might not know these things, especially being raised 30, 40, 50 years ago, because I'm confident that people now know that there are problems and risk factors that they can avoid.
Just in the previous segment, we were talking about how it's hard to imagine that people these days don't know about contraception and what they need to do to have the kind of family life that they want to have or don't want to have. It's kind of hard to imagine how anybody these days can't know everything they need to know. And that same idea, that same kind of puzzlement kind of applies to this as well. When asked if they were following, again, the same survey regarding the health situation here, when asked if they were following their doctor's advice regarding their hypertension or their diabetes, about 30% of the people said no. So you have diabetes, the doctor looks you in the eye, says, you have diabetes, this can result in these consequences, and to avoid that, you need to do ABC. 30% of the people said, whatevs.
That is something that I've come across. I've heard quite a lot when it comes to diabetes, especially older people. They're told, you can't eat this, you can't eat that. You have to follow this exercise regime, this diet, and you have to take this medication or insulin. And a lot of people just ignore it, or they stick to it one day, they don't care the next. They eat things they shouldn't, and then they're surprised that they're like losing a foot or going blind, which is usually one of the main problems when it comes to poorly managed diabetes. Amputation of feet in Poland is still a big thing. You know, it doesn't really happen, diabetic foot anywhere.
Diabetes is a big thing throughout the Western world, I think.
But actually losing parts of your body due to it in the U.S. or Western Europe.
Now, to get that far, to get to the point where you've lost a foot, you kind of have to ignore your doctor's advice.
You kind of have
for
to
years
ignore it, and then you have to see, like, there seems to be a sore something in my leg. Whatever.
Whatevs. I saved the best one for last, or maybe the worst one for last. Here's the one that blows my mind. I'm having trouble, honestly, believing this one. Again, same survey. 59% of the respondents to the survey knew that cigarettes were dangerous, which means 41% didn't know. 41% of people say, well, cigarettes dangerous? What? How does that happen? Okay, if this were 1953, okay, all right, maybe. But in 2018, 2019, how is it possible that 41% of the public, or at least 41% of the people surveyed, don't know cigarettes are dangerous?
See, 41% of the people surveyed. This is where, when I said, like, you have to take statistics with a grain of salt, it's like we don't have access to this information, their methodology, and what kind of population they were actually studying. Because even though I'm generally quite pessimistic about the population in general, I said general twice there, I still think this is an exaggeration. I can't believe that it's at 41%, because that's basically would mean you could take a random group of people on the street on a bus, and almost half of them don't know that about cigarettes.
I don't believe that number, even if the survey was only given to people over the age of 60. I still wouldn't believe it. Even people of the 60, 65, 70 plus generation in Poland, I'm convinced that they know that cigarettes are not good for them. So
to be honest, yeah, you have the warning labels on cigarette packs, so it's there. That information is there. But even people who ignore that information, don't read it anymore, know that there's that information on there. It's like they might have read it once in their life and then don't ignore it, but they are aware of that information. So
just as a side thing here, Mike, I'm curious, based on your experience as a doctor and what you see at work, attitudes to smoking, the famously fried Polish diet, heavy on meats and fats and stuff like that. Do you think the general attitude, to the extent we can generalize, do you think the public attitude towards health and health consciousness here is any different, better, worse than elsewhere in Europe?
I would say that especially like with urban populations and younger people like under 40, it's definitely swinging in the direction like it is in the rest of Europe and in the States, maybe to the point of being excessive right now that everything has to be organic, vegan, free trade, blah, 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 without actually people understanding that those things don't matter. What matters is making sure that your diet is well balanced and that you're exercising and ignoring other risk factors that could influence your health in a negative way. I'd say it's definitely improving here. It's probably not on the same level, but it's getting there.
Josh, any idea, input on comparing the Polish diet and lifestyle to the British diet and lifestyle?
Well, I don't get the impression that the Polish diet is particularly unhealthy. I'll stand up and say that I'm kind of happy that recent years have shown that the scare stories about eating too much fat have largely, that's been kind of debunked, and that actually, eating fat is a very important part of your diet. And I think that, I cook a lot of my food, and I have a fairly sort of meat and potatoes diet, and I think it's a pretty healthy one, actually. But, with variety, obviously. Different kinds of potatoes on different days.
Let's move on. Now, this is where we start to string together. I think it's like 5 or 6 stories all related to the same subject. Oh, I love it when it works out like this. We have an obsession with transportation on this show, do you know? We seem to talk about this quite a bit. Is that,
we all live in different places, and we have to get to different places. So how do we do that? We transport ourselves.
It's relevant to everybody. Everybody listening, you're on the tram, you're taking a bus. It's something we deal with on a daily basis, but can't really say I planned it this way, but it just turns out that a lot of our news this week is related to transport. We'll start with something we talked about before when it was at the proposal stage, and right now it's moving to basically the point where the city government is going to vote up or down on this. And of course, we're talking about the increase in tickets for trams and buses in Krakow. The two big pieces of the two big changes, I guess I should say, the ones that are making the news, the ones that people are complaining about, are some changes in the temporary the tickets. You know, there's two types. There's what we call the carnet, which is something you buy, you know, like month to month, and you can ride whatever. And then there's the individual tickets, which are quite popular with a lot of people, including myself. And that's where the problem lies. The 20-minute ticket, which currently costs 2 zlotys and 80 groszy, is disappearing to be replaced by a 15-minute ticket, which will cost 3 zlotys. So 5 minutes shorter and 20 groszy more expensive. And the 40-minute ticket, which currently costs 3.80, is going to be replaced by a 30-minute ticket, which will cost 4. So it's going to be 10 minutes shorter and cost 20 groszy more. So a lot of people are not happy about this, but the MPK, the tram and bus people, say they need the money to cover the costs. The current prices are not covering the budget. No idea if the city government's going to approve it or not. Guys, how do you think it's going to turn out, and what do you think about the proposed changes?
I can understand the need for changes in the prices. They haven't gone up in a couple of years, and we know expenses have gone up. People are generally earning more money. The structure that they're presenting or proposing right now, that's a whole nother matter. I mean, the main argument for their changes that they're bringing in is that they want to entice more people to actually buy these season passes and then use public transportation more often. That's part of it. And the other part as well is the fact that in Krakow, if you live here and you pay your taxes here, you get discounts. One of the discounts being, of course, that you can buy these passes for cheaper. So they want those people to buy those tickets. Or then people who are visiting Krakow only for, say, a short period of time for 1 or 2 days and don't pay taxes here regularly, then they'll have to buy these more expensive one-day tickets or one-ride tickets that actually cover more of the price of the actual ride. Because you have to remember, that even though you're paying for this ticket, the city and the company and everybody still has to subsidize this to a certain extent. Your ticket, your 280 ticket, doesn't actually cover the cost of the electricity, the labor, the maintenance of the network.
You know, they keep comparing the prices here to the prices in Warsaw, the prices in Wrocław and Poznan, the other big cities. And even if the changes that I just described are voted into law, even if they're approved, Krakow will still be the cheapest or one of the cheapest of the major Polish cities. So that's kind of the argument in favor of the changes. But it just seems to me that, I can remember not so long ago, I remember paying $120 for a 15-minute ticket. That's full price, not the student price. $120, and then it was $140, $160, $180, $220. You know, it's a tick, tick, tick. Every year, every 18 months, there seems to be a price increase. And I've kind of lost patience. I mean, I obviously, I understand the numbers aspect of it, the numbers argument. You have to pay for things. I get it, but it seems that they constantly have to ratchet things up. They get the price they want, and then 18 months later, we didn't realize we have to cover these costs, and so it seems like a never-ending process of price rises. Josh?
Well, I mean, there are conflicting things going on here, aren't there? I mean, on the one hand, the city wants to raise more revenue to cover the costs of running the public transport system, but on the other hand, they want to discourage people from driving into the city. And if the theory is, of course, that a cheaper public transport will be more of an incentive for people to use public transport, whereas more expensive public transport will be a disincentive, and people will continue to, or indeed increase, using cars, which is not what they want. So I can see the sense to an extent whereby those people who might regularly use cars on a daily basis to come into the city because they work here and they live just outside, if there's some kind of sweetener so that they can get cheaper season tickets, then that's a good thing. But it turns out that you have to be a city taxpayer to be eligible.
You have to be
for
like you have to be Karta Krakowska, I think.
So if you're a car commuter who lives outside the city limits, you don't get the advantage of this, and then you're probably not necessarily near a tram stop or a bus stop, so you're driving to the tram stop and you think, well, sod it, I'm going to drive all the way into town. And
that's an idea that you see repeated over and over in the reader comments on various online stories about this subject. People say, you know what, you're just pushing me to the point where I have to consider what I'm paying to ride the buses and trams versus what I'm going to pay to ride in my own car, and the price is becoming closer and closer all the time. So why would I sacrifice the convenience of having my own personal transportation for, waiting at tram stops and getting on crowded trams and, being disappointed when it's late. The uncertainty of public transport when I can just drive my own car for just a little bit more. So I think a lot of people are thinking the same thing.
I mean, but would you think something like, what do they call it, a congestion zone or a congestion charge like they have in London? I mention this because I was in London for the first time for several years, and in central London in January. And the thing that really struck me was how quiet it was walking around by Hyde Park Corner, which I kind of remember as being sort of a seething mass of, snarling vehicles. And now there's much less vehicles, and a lot of the ones that actually are there are electric vehicles, because you don't have to pay the congestion charge if you have an electric vehicle.
All right, yeah.
And they're very, very quiet. So, I mean, even though I'm kind of on the side of the motorist, I like driving and all that stuff, it was actually quite pleasant that London was quiet. And, central Krakow, is blighted a little bit by the heavy amount of traffic. Then, people should, make it difficult. There's discussion about the park and ride, which seems to be, make lots of parking spaces available near tram stops, and then, but they don't.
Staying on the subject of buses and trams, this week we learned that the city has decided to move forward with a project to add the Ukrainian language to the machines that we use to buy our tickets for public transport. Both the ones that we find at the tram stops, some tram stops, and the ones on the buses and trams themselves. Obviously, it's a reflection of the significant number of Ukrainians living in Krakow. The Ukrainian consulate here says that just over 70,000 Ukrainians in Krakow now. That's the official number, so unofficially it's sure to be more than that, which amounts to not quite 10% of the city is now Ukrainian. And again, as a reflection of that, buses and trams going to have the Ukrainian language on the ticket machines. Guys, what do you think?
I can understand that. I mean, the machines already don't they have several languages right now, like English and German?
Right now, depending on the machine, some of them have 3 and some of them have 6. And when they have 6, it's Polish, obviously, English, German, Italian, French, and Spanish. Now, of those, no offense, but I vote for French to get kicked out.
Yeah, I don't see that many French people coming here, and God damn it, you just learn English, you people.
The English, obviously a must. German, okay, next door. Spanish, a lot of Spanish tourists here.
Really, a lot of
Spanish here. And the Italians, well, I like the Italians. They can say, fine, let's leave Italian. But
but what you're saying is you don't like the French, John.
I don't have a problem with the French people. Just, I'm with Mike. They can probably speak English anyway. So, well, so can the Germans. What German doesn't speak English?
French people
actually,
don't speak
I had
English.
German in high school. I was actually, I wouldn't say fluent, but I was quite comfortable in using the language, watching TV, reading.
Germans
And then every time I met a German person, we just ended up speaking English. And I realized after a while that what's the point of speaking German? If a German can't speak English, he's probably not worth talking to anyway.
The only sticking point in this in the project right now is the cost of adding Ukrainian to kind of the IT infrastructure.
They presumably employ Ukrainians to do this, don't they? So,
we have to increase the population of Ukrainians to help deal with the population.
The translator,
I see. The
and the IT guys,
buried
all
in
of
it.
them.
Yeah.
130,000 zlotys. I don't know what cost that much, but 130,000 zlotys.
That must be nearly Microvsky's annual salary.
So I don't know how long this is going to take, but at some point, I imagine in the near future, you're going to see Ukrainian added to the ticket machines.
Just to add to all our other problems with the increased prices. No, Ukrainian on the machine.
Yeah, let's blame them. This reminds me of something I saw just before Christmas. I noticed that Multikino offers some of their movies with Ukrainian subtitles now. Again, as a reflection of the number of Ukrainians here. So I'd be curious to know maybe some other businesses. I'm sure you guys have seen, and when I say you guys, I'm talking to Dr. Mike and Josh, but also you guys listening. You've seen various advertisements for banks around town in Ukrainian, for money services, also telecoms. I think either Play or T-Mobile. One of them had posters and billboards in Ukrainian. So it's 70,000 people. It's a big market, so it's not shouldn't be surprising.
Money to be made, and most Ukrainians are actually working here as well.
Exactly. So keep an eye out for that. What else we got? Oh, still with buses and trams. Actually, more specifically on buses this time. News this week that the city is going to buy 153 more, because they already have some, 153 more electric buses, partially with European Union funds, not only, but 153 electric buses, almost 400 million zlotys. Now, the idea, of course, is to help cut down on the emissions and the smog problem here in Krakow. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I find it hard to believe that 150 vehicles out of the tens and tens of thousands on the road switching to electric is going to make any difference in the smog levels. More of a feel-good thing. Josh, am I wrong or what?
Well, I mean, there is an extent to which, like, heavy vehicles with diesel engines emit a lot more particulate pollution than private cars do. But that said, I think that you're right. I mean, it's kind of a drop in the ocean, really. And I'm interested in the actual kind of what shall we say, the per mile operating costs, because these things would have to be recharged.
These buses cost like 30% more than a regular bus. Plus, when they're charging, they're out of commission for a couple of hours.
Oh yeah, comfortably.
So they from what I read, they do plan on buying more buses anyway to increase capacity of the system, but they have to buy even more buses because part of the buses will always be out getting recharged before they can go drive again. And I wonder what the longevity of these kind of buses are with these batteries, because a car that you can charge at home and you can keep at that comfortable 50% charge rate, you can keep that going for years and years and years. But a bus is going to have a huge charge and discharge cycle. I wonder how long these batteries will last.
And also, Josh, I think you know something about this. Given our climate here, at certain times of the year when it's quite cold, aren't these batteries going to lose like some very significant portion of their charge because of the weather?
Well, that can happen. Yeah, I mean, it's not. It wasn't clear to me from the article whether they're lead acid or lithium-ion batteries, but each has their own kind of shortcomings as well as advantages. And one of the things with lithium-ion batteries, of course, is that they are quite unstable, and they're often used in mobile phones and laptops. And whenever you hear like horror stories about laptops kind of getting incredibly hot or bursting into flames, it's because of lithium-ion batteries. And the reason is that they contain an enormous amount of energy compressed into a very small volume, and that energy, if released quickly, will that's what a bomb is, basically. So, there are obviously advantages in terms of nothing coming out of the exhaust pipe with an electric vehicle, but it shouldn't be assumed that all is rosy everywhere else. And of course, there's the cost of the generating the electricity, both the physical cost and the environmental cost.
Made by coal, by the way.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that if we all switch to electric cars, you're like, we get rid of emissions in city centers, but having a car in a household is like having a second household. That's the amount of energy you would need every night to charge it to use it the next day. So let's just imagine all the households in Poland and double that when it comes to the amount of electricity that we would need.
Yeah, it just seems that when we talk about electric buses, on a dollars and cents accounting, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's more of a thing where governments, especially today, especially in the European Union, governments are expected to kind of set an example of kinds, I guess. Look how green we are, even if it's a tiny, almost insignificant percentage of the cars on the road. Poland, nowhere near the top of the pack when it comes to electric car ownership. In Norway, it's like 30%. It's crazy, but we don't make Norwegian money here, people. So in Poland,
it's tax incentives out there. Apparently,
that's true. You get like free.
If you buy an electric car, you don't have to pay VAT tax on it, so it comes out cheaper than a luxury car.
You don't have to pay tolls on roads. You can get ferries for free and whatnot. Well, in Poland, it's less than 1% of all the cars out there, so it's statistically insignificant, basically, but. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, look out for the new electric buses.
I can see one place where electric buses would be really nice, though, as night buses. Because there's no traffic and you're sleeping at home. All of a sudden, you just hear the bus go by every 45 minutes, belching out, those huge engines just like rumbling down the street.
For the benefit of people sleeping.
Yeah, for being quieter.
Interesting idea. But do we have that many night buses running these days? I mean, it's not that many.
There are quite a few, and the thing is, they run through the center of town, like down Dietla, and you have the window open here, and it's generally quiet at 3 a.m, except every 35 minutes when that night bus goes by. I'm just trying to look for
it's night trams as well.
It's for your benefit, because both you guys live close to Dietla, so really you have selfish reasons for this.
But I always look through the world through a prism of self-interest.
Just as a side note to this, I have to mention this because I came across this story like 3 minutes after I saw the previous stories about increasing the ticket prices and spending huge money on electric buses. This was in the mix as well. Again, I saw it right after one after another. the Krakow city government, they're fighting over a proposal to spend 15 million zlotys, and that covers a lot of the new, more expensive tram tickets. 15 million zlotys on a new monkey enclosure at the zoo. So
sorry, we're not on transport anymore then.
So, well, we've taken a kind of we've come off that highway for just a moment.
Okay.
We took the monkey exit, the zoo exit. So is it just weird? Am I the only one who thinks it's weird that on the one hand we're fighting about an extra 20 grosha and 5 minutes or 10 minutes shaved off your ticket, but at the same time we've got 15 million zlotys for a new monkey cage at the zoo? Is that weird?
Well, monkeys ain't cheap, so I guess we got to cover that somehow. Yeah, but I could
monkeys ain't cheap. I think we have our episode title right there. Thanks, Micah. Right. Yeah, this is true. Anyway, if you go to the zoo this year, you might see the new monkey enclosure. So if you paid, if you took the tram or you can take a tram to the zoo, but if you took a bus to the zoo on a more expensive ticket, your extra 20 grosha helped to fund the monkey enclosure at the zoo. Anyway, last thing on transport. Actually, no, second to last thing. We found out in 2018. On the roads of Krakow, see the connection here? Roads, transport. Yeah. In 2018, on the roads inside the Krakow city limits, 23 people killed in accidents, and 17 of those 23 were pedestrians. Now, more than one person, again, in the online comments on this story, more than one person made a reference to the fact, this is only half a joke, they made a reference to the fact that not that many drivers die in accidents in Krakow because you can almost never get out of second gear. You're never going fast enough in your car to cause a fatal accident. So that's part of the reason. And it's kind of half a joke. I think there's an element of truth in that. Yeah. But do you see any significance in the fact that such a high percentage of deaths are pedestrians in Krakow?
Well, yeah. Now hold on. This is because we've looked at something similar to this before, and isn't it the case that quite a large number of these pedestrian deaths are people diving out into the road where there's not a pedestrian crossing?
Yep.
So it makes it initially. Your feeling is that it's these terrible Polish drivers that are kind of reaping carnage on the streets, but actually it looks more like these terrible Polish pedestrians who don't know how to cross the road properly.
Exactly. Just look both ways. Don't jump in front of the bus, literally. There was actually a recording going around on the news in Poland the other day about I think it was like a 10-year-old boy that quite honestly jumped in front of a bus. There's dash cam footage of what's happening. The bus
do something with a reflexive laugh there, Josh. That was the wrong time for a laugh.
Didn't we have the previous article about life expectancy in Poland dropping?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. See, it's all connected, people.
No, but you can actually see on the dash cam, the bus is driving properly, and you see the kid first crossing the road that's intersecting with the road that the bus is on. So the boy is running parallel to the bus, and then as he crosses the road, he turns right in front of the bus to cross at that intersection in front of the bus, as if.
But he was okay. Let's make that.
I think he just broke his legs, but he survived.
Okay, he survived.
But you see this kid.
Just for the record, we do not laugh at kids getting hit by buses, although sometimes it can be a little bit funny, I guess, maybe.
I mean, I think the kid learned his lesson because you could see the bus driver had no time to reaction, and there was no reason for him to think.
His fault, yeah.
He couldn't even have thought that this kid would literally turn 90 degrees.
Well, Josh is right. We have talked about this before. There was a different report on pedestrian accidents and fatalities, and I've forgotten the numbers exactly, but the overwhelming portion or percentage of the accidents are caused by people crossing on red, crossing where they shouldn't. The drivers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe they're going a little bit fast. Okay, drivers do that. But you follow the traffic rules as a pedestrian, and you're probably going to be okay. You run out into the middle of the street, you might get hit by a bus. And so we don't know the particulars of all of these cases, of course, but that's the likely explanation for why 75% of all the traffic fatalities last year in Krakow were pedestrians instead of drivers. Yeah.
And going back to the whole second gear concept where, cars don't go fast enough for the drivers to be hurt. You don't have to go that fast to actually injure seriously a pedestrian, because it's not only the actual impact of the car, but in the dynamics of a pedestrian being hit by a car, then the pedestrian flies forward and then slams on the ground, often causing serious head trauma as well. That can often be the cause of death. Not the actual impact itself, but the secondary impact of hitting the ground.
Ouch. We're going to close on this note, and maybe this explains, wow, we just put all the blame on pedestrians. This story illustrates how it's not always their fault. It could be the drivers to the bus driver. This story comes out of Olsztyn. which is what is that? North Central? Where's Olsztyn? North Central Poland, kind of
Something like that. Yeah,
close to
the
Missouri.
sea,
Yeah. A bus driver in Olsztyn realized that the hour was approaching where the shops were going to close at 10 o'clock. Apparently, there's kind of local rules, regulations in Olsztyn. No alcohol sold after 10 o'clock. His shift was ending after 10 o'clock, so he realized this was his chance to buy some alcohol. He wanted some kind of vodka, some kind of, what's it called, gorshka? What's it called?
It's like
Zorkova Gorshka?
yeah, it's like an herbal vodka.
And so he's driving past some alcohol shop, decides to stop the bus. He's at work. People on the bus. He decides to stop the bus. He locks everybody inside.
No.
He walks into the shop, and somebody overheard him saying something like, I got to grab this before 10 o'clock. He walks inside the shop. 3 minutes later, he comes out with his vodka, gets back on the bus, and continues his route. Now, how he was caught exactly, and I'm looking at the story now. There are pictures of him. Everybody's got a phone in their pockets now, so it's all documented. I guess somebody informed the police or his boss or something like that. Anyway, city bus driver decides he's got to get his booze before 10 o'clock, locks everybody in for 3 minutes. Maybe it's not the pedestrian's fault after all.
Oh, yeah, that's
Wow.
So these could be some of the negative consequences if they introduce that prohibition of alcohol here in Poland, in Krakow, after 10 o'clock sales.
Look it up on the internet, people. It's the article I'm looking at is Twój Kurier Olsztyński, and it's got all the pictures of the guy getting off the bus, going in. It was a Żabka. He's going into the Żabka. He comes out with his bottle, gets back on the bus, and goes back to work like it's nothing.
Oh, yeah, because the Google Translate actually rather unhelpfully translated that headline into, it was like bottle of frogs or something. Driver gets out, locks passengers in to get bottle of frogs.
The headline says some skoczył po flaszkę do Żabki. So yeah, the headline. Yeah, thanks Google Translate. Anyway, guys, that is the news for this week. Hey, don't forget to check out our sponsors at bigdoor24.pl for all your real estate needs, buying, selling, renting, all that stuff. That's bigdoor24.pl /KrakCast, special offer, cashback offer, actually. So, Big Door 24 for everything connected with buying, selling, renting real estate. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for commenting, clicking, liking, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time on the KrakCast.